Today's episode is brought to you by We Break You Buy. Interested in sports cards and memorabilia? Check out We Break You Buy on TikTok. We Break You Buy is a small operation run by three brothers, offering spots for a chance at winning some incredible sports cards and memorabilia. That's We Break You Buy. Check it out today on TikTok. Why Wasn't It Better? I am your host, Patrick Darms.
And I am your co-host, Anton Paras.
And joining us is a guest, a return guest, making his very third appearance on the podcast. Garret Ohringer, welcome back.
Hi, Pat. Hi, Anton. Really happy to be back here for the third time, talking about a third comic movie, and the third movie in a trilogy, too. Just patterns and threes. Loving it.
That's good.
Ooh, love it. Welcome back, Garret.
Thrilled to have you back, Garret.
I'm thrilled to be back.
You know, 3 appearances makes you a serious guest.
It feels good to be taken seriously, you know? It feels good.
You feel more important now, right?
I'm putting this on my LinkedIn under skills right after we get off.
As you should.
If the show was Pawn Stars, you would be a comic book movie expert that we'd bring in.
I thought you were going to be like, you're Chumley or something like that. Like, just a fat, sodden guy. Wait, I think he actually passed away. That's really sad. I'm sorry.
Did he really?
Did he?
I think so. I think I need to look this up.
I mean,
no, he's still alive. Thank
he's
God.
still alive.
Okay.
He's still alive.
Okay, never mind.
Chumley, a.k.a. Austin Lee Russell, if you're still out there listening to this, I apologize for presuming you dead. You're a good man.
Is he? I don't know anything about
I'm
him.
not making any more comments about Chumley. Anyway,
all right, we can. Yeah, it's great to have you back, Garret. Garret, was it out of bounds to say early congratulations to you?
For what specifically?
Well, by the time our listeners hear this, you will be a married man.
Ah, yes. Thank you very much. While we are recording this right now, I just got back from my soon-to-be wife's wedding shower, and it was a great time. And we got our marriage license ready and everything, so it is coming real. So even though I can't grow a mustache, I am getting married, and I am very much excited for it. And again, thank you for the early yet probably present congratulations by the time this releases.
You're quite welcome. Yeah. I am just going to assume that my invitation was lost in the mail.
Yeah, blame the USPS, not me.
Well, I have problems with the USPS, but that's for another podcast. Anything you'd like to plug, Garret, before we delve into this?
I have nothing to plug. It is a beautiful spring day today in New York City, so this is just a friendly reminder for all of us to get outside and touch some grass, because there's a lot of bad going on in this world, but it's nothing a little nature can't fix. So just plugging our mental health, I guess you could say.
Nice. Love that message.
It's a great way to put it. I love it. And then you can go back inside and watch the New York Knicks play some playoff basketball.
Exactly. And hopefully by the time this episode releases, I am not a very depressed man because of whatever the Knicks and Rangers might have or have not done in the playoffs.
Well, I will say this. By the time this episode releases, if it all goes well for the Knicks, they will be in the finals.
That is the hope, and that is literally everything I've waited my entire 33 years on this earth for. I'm really not selling that short of how sad my sports fandom is. But again, like you said about the USPS, another podcast.
Well, I mean, the Knicks, it's been a rocky couple decades,
Yeah, Anton, be grateful for what you've seen in your life, okay?
From up here on the throne, feels nice.
Well, the Warriors, they were in the wilderness for a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure.
They were the team that you're like, oh yeah, there is a team in Oakland.
It's really funny. Before Steph Curry, the greatest moment, I guess, Chris Mullin in our lifetime, but we were kids, and then just Baron Davis dunking all over everybody in those playoffs way back in the early aughts or mid-aughts, I should say.
Well, what was funny is they kept taking players in the draft that ended up being great somewhere else, whether it was Gilbert Arenas, Weber.
Oh, Chris Weber. What a clown.
King's great.
Yeah. Oof, yeah. I mean, hey,
Latrell Sprewell. Love him.
Hey, great Nick. Great Nick. We love him.
He was a great Nick. You're
I
right.
will accept no slander.
Yeah,
He wasn't that great of a coach. Let's be honest.
I thought
Latrell
it had something
he
to do with
wasn't.
mustard.
Latrell had to feed his family.
Oh, you're right.
okay?
Didn't he tell him to like pass better and or whatever?
he
It's
was
like
like-
Latrell Sprewell was like, I don't think so.
He was like,
Latrell's
pass
like, that
better.
doesn't exist in my dictionary.
Put some mustard on that pass, and then he got choked out.
I think my favorite part of that story is that not only did he choke him out, his teammates took him into the locker room to calm him down, and then he came back out and attempted to choke him out again.
The NBA is so cool. I love it.
Just imagine if that happened today in like the era of social media.
I mean, well, we had Draymond punching Jordan.
I was
going
gonna say the closest thing is like
that's nothing
Draymond.
like that.
Yeah, no, that's my
nothing
point.
like
It's
that.
nothing like that, and we
No.
treated it like 59-11s like occurred in the NBA.
No, imagine if the Malice at the Palace happened today.
Oh my gosh, they'd be
I
talking
think
about it
about
for
that.
years.
I think about that on a daily basis, and I wish I were exaggerating, but I literally had this exact conversation with my fiance because we just watched The Untold about Malice in the Palace, and she's like, could that happen today? And now that keeps me up at night. I'm not even exaggerating here.
I don't think it could because, well, we're really getting into on a tangent here, but it's like, so you've seen the documentary too. Is like there was really not any cops there.
That
So
baffles me.
weird.
There was like 2 police officers in the whole building. It's amazing.
Detroit, man. Detroit.
Yeah.
Detroit in 2004.
Yep.
Beautiful place now. Visited recently. Pretty beautiful, gonna say.
Yes. Some of it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Some of it. Shout out to a friend of the show and guest Kai Wang, who lives just outside of Detroit.
Shout out. I haven't met you, Kai, but you seem like a good dude, and Detroit's cool. So, stamp of approval in my book.
You may know Kai from the Revenge of the
Sith.
Sith episode.
I do know him very well, actually. And you know what? Now you're even
Yes.
a bigger friend of mine.
He will be appearing on a episode next season. He has chosen to try to defend the honor of Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within.
Good luck, Kai.
Good luck, Kai. Ready
You
for when?
not a fan,
ready for that
Garrett?
one. Ugh.
I bought that movie on DVD for like my PS2 when I was 12. I don't know how I convinced my parents to give me like $12 for that. I'm saying that with such
Childhood
disdain in my
ended.
voice. Yeah.
I don't know how that first-time director convinced Sony to give him $130 million to make it.
I got nothing. I
Yeah.
really got nothing. I don't even have a witty joke. I have no quips.
We'll find out when we record that episode, Anton.
Yes, we will.
We'll attempt to answer it.
Well, we have today's episode though. Should we
do.
dig in?
We should. Before we get to today's film, though, I do want to give a very special shout out to Zion Parker. He was our guest on Oppenheimer. He's a friend of the show. He has just published his first cookbook. It is called Delicious Not Suspicious. You can find it on his Linktree, and I'm not sure if he's selling it on Amazon, so I don't want to misspeak, but he's possibly selling it on Amazon. But we will publish links for that in the show notes. So congratulations, Zion. This is a huge achievement for him. We're really happy for him. And if any of our listeners are looking for their next cookbook, you just found it.
Congrats, Zion. We're happy for you.
Zion's going to be back, maybe for to talk about one of the Harry Potter films. I'm not sure, but
That'll be a good time.
I think so. Garrett, where do you stand on the Harry Potter films?
They used to come out on my birthday. My birthday is November 18th. Thank you all for the birthday wishes, even though we're, as of recording, maybe 7 months away, but I digress. To me,
it's not a
they were
reminder.
fine. They're fine. They were a good thing to do with my friends on Friday when they came out as a way to celebrate my birthday. But do I think about them? No. Do I really care that they're rebooting them? No. Do I think J.K. Rowling is the worst person ever? Yes. So that's my
Whoa.
thoughts. Yes.
Whoa. Shots fired.
Yeah, sorry.
Well,
Whoops.
so-
Got a little
So
political.
Garrett, I was gonna say, well, Garrett, what house are you?
Oh, I would totally be Ravenclaw. Like, I live downtown in the East Village. I refuse to go above like 14th Street. I spend all my time hanging out in like deep Brooklyn. My favorite music is like sad white indie girls. So it's got to be Ravenclaw.
Sounds a little bit more like Hufflepuff to me.
I resent that.
Sad indie music.
I feel like Hufflepuff is more like Pink and No Doubt, but like after hella good, No Doubt. You know what I mean?
When they declined.
Yeah, when they declined and got like Harajuku girly.
That
My 2 cents.
sounds like we could do a whole podcast episode on that.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get to Iron Man 3. Like, I think we got 17 like subtopics that.
No, we are. We're going to get to
Oh, okay.
Iron Man 3 right now. Anyway, today's episode, we are talking about the third Iron Man film, which is called Iron Man 3. I am grateful for it that they didn't do some goofy subtitle like Legend of the Ten Rings or something like that. But a lot of the Marvel movies I think are fun to talk about. This is going to be fun. I can already tell. In case the listeners don't know, Garrett is a massive comic book fan. I don't know if he's a bigger comic book fan than Anton. Maybe the two of them will debate that on this episode. We'll find out. I'll try to instigate it. But yeah, I mean, we're excited to have you on for this, Garrett. You have been talking about doing this for quite a while since we had you on for your very first appearance when we talked about the misunderstood masterpiece that was the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
And speaking of misunderstood masterpieces, that is how I view Iron Man 3. So I am not going to hide my feelings right from the get-go here. So I am very excited to talk about this movie.
You don't have to hide your opinion. A lot of our guests fall into the trap of like, well, I'm not really allowed to say what I think until the end. No, if you love something, you let us know.
Oh, my point is, I'm not burying the lead here. I am literally heart on my sleeve showcasing my love for this movie throughout the next however many minutes or hours or honestly days that we'll be talking about this film.
I'm excited.
So excited.
You can tell from the tone of my voice.
We're all very excited.
Yeah, we are. Okay, I will intro this for us. Plagued with PTSD since saving New York from destruction, Tony Stark is more dependent than ever on the suits that give him his Iron Man persona. So much so that every aspect of his life is affected, including his relationship with Pepper Potts. After a malevolent enemy known as the Mandarin reduces his personal world to rubble, Tony must rely solely on instinct and ingenuity to avenge his losses and protect the people he loves. Iron Man 3 was released on May 3rd, 2013 by Marvel Studios and Walt Disney Studios, directed by Shane Black, screenplay by Shane Black and Drew Pearce, starring Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Guy Pearce, Rebecca Hall, Don Cheadle, Ty Simpkins, James Badge Dale, Jon Favreau, and Ben Kingsley. The budget was $200 million. Adjusted for inflation, that is $263 million. And the box office was $1.21 billion. Adjusted for inflation, that is $1.6 billion. Garrett, you said you love this movie, but why did you want to talk about this and be on this week's episode?
Personally, I think this is one of the most misunderstood superhero films, and honestly, just a very misunderstood film in general. Coming off the heels of a movie like Avengers, which in its own right did such a great job just taking basically what was barely interconnected stories into just kind of a world cataclysmic event that involved not only heroes on the ground, but aliens in space. This really brought not only, I would say, superhero movies back, but also really the Marvel universe back to these human stake stories, which we're not really seeing today, too. We have Tony grappling with his PTSD here. We have him really letting himself down and by proxy a lot of the people in his life and really deconstructing the idea of what it means to be a superhero and really what it means to be a human in a world where there's portals opening the sky, too. And again, I think this is very common and very understood too, but the theme of the movie really being, is it the man that makes the suit or the suit that makes the man? I find that so interesting too. And I know we'll get into this too, but I wish Marvel kind of leaned in more into that character aspect versus kind of having the general kind of Marvel tropes of it all. But overall, I do think this is one of the last kind of Marvel movies that takes one of the biggest swings and really does it allow it to be less about the superhero and the explosions, although there are a lot and they are great, and really focuses on the character. So I really just love the character-driven nature of this film, and it just resonates with me a lot.
Well said, Garrett. But just to make sure that our listeners know, just throw it out there. Which Iron Man suit is your favorite from the film?
That is a really tough one. I love the look of Mark 42. I just think the flipping of the gold and the red is just so striking. But honestly, the stealth suit that comes out in the final battle too, it's shown for such like a brief moment, but it's just got that like slick black with like the electrical wiring. A big fan of that. And obviously just Igor, because my, comic book nerd self definitely did a type of inhale thinking that was Hulkbuster at first, but I digress. So I have a few favorites, but we'll probably go with 42.
Interesting. I thought you'd be more of a Mark 57 man, but yeah.
Honestly, if you put a gun to my head and say, literally look at this photo and tell me which mark is which, I'd be like, just pull the trigger.
Okay, I was gonna say because I have like absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
I was gonna say, look, you'll know exactly which one is Igor. It's the one that's hunched over.
It's the one, yeah, it's the one
I
that like
still don't know.
buttresses the beam at the end. And the
Still don't
listeners,
know.
you'll understand.
I hope they do, because if they haven't, they probably would have shut this off by now.
Well, then I apologize to any potential advertisers in that case.
No, there's no way they shut this off. Your passion for this film is infectious.
I'm glad Anton knows what I'm referring to and which suits.
Yeah, it's a good time. Like I said, fellow comic book fan, nerds unite.
Yeah, and I think at this point, Garrett, I am a very, very casual comic book fan. I've never read any Marvel comic. My knowledge is limited to basically the movies, and I've seen some of the animated films that Marvel used to put out before the MCU was a thing. Like I actually saw the animated Avengers film from like the mid 2000s that was like direct to DVD. I enjoyed it. But that's what my knowledge of these characters is limited to. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out the post-Avengers part of this. This was the first Marvel movie to be released after the Avengers. This is what they called Phase 2.
Mm-hmm.
And by this point, there was no more uncertainty about the MCU, right? It was a runaway success. The Avengers exceeded all expectations financially and with the fans, too. I don't really think there's any Marvel fans that dislike the Avengers. For what it's worth, I loved that movie. I really still enjoy the first Avengers movie. It's a lot of fun, especially for someone like me who wasn't super familiar with all the characters and the world building. I thought they really got everything right there. And I really liked the first Iron Man film. The second one, it's fine. It has its moments, but it's certainly no great film. But I was excited for this one. Shane Black is a filmmaker that I really like. And when I found out that he was going to be directing this, I was excited for it. And once my comic book consigliere educated me on like what the Mandarin was, I was even more excited. I thought this would be a home run. Is he one of, if not the most dangerous of Iron Man's foes in the comics? Is that correct?
Oh yeah, fair, very fair to say.
I feel like he's like Iron Man's main villain. I mean, way back when in Iron Man 1, that's who Jon Favreau wanted as the villain versus Obadiah Stane, but they couldn't figure out a way to not make him like so Fu Manchu, style Mandarin. But yes.
Hey, Tony.
Yeah, so they were like, Favreau was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this without being the most racist person ever. So that's how we get Tony building that in a cave with a box of scraps.
But they figured it out.
Exactly.
They did. You hire Jeff Bridges and it all works out.
Exactly. Just hire Jeff Bridges. That's the answer to everything when you can't figure out an answer.
Maybe Jeff Bridges should have played the Mandarin. I'm just kidding.
Holy moly.
Yeah. I have some suggestions on that we'll get to later, though. Anton, were you very excited for this film?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, listeners will know I'm a big comic book fan, love me some MCU, and of course, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, what could you not be excited for? And especially being a big fan of the comics, it was the trailers that really hyped up that this was just another film in the series that was really feeding into the fan service. So I was really ready for lots of armor, lots of action, a big blowout third film for Iron Man. And hey, there were a lot of surprises. You actually don't get Tony in the suit a lot, but we're going to dig into more of that. And at the end of the day, I will say, a fun to revisit this film.
It was an extremely successful film. It made a colossal amount of money at the box office. In fact, it outgrossed both of its predecessors combined, or maybe almost. Reviews were good, 79% Rotten Tomatoes score. But Iron Man 3 is a very divisive film. This is one of, if not the most divisive Marvel films ever released. Would you agree?
Oh my gosh.
It was very polar. I think this was like the first time I remember walking out of the theater with friends and we had the disagreement. We're like, this is what's coming out after the Avengers? Or I was like, wow, I can't believe they were able to follow up the Avengers with something like this. Like that was the first time I remember having a conversation like that instead of just all being in agreement that these were good movies. And yes, we all loved Thor and I will hear no slander.
We like Thor in this podcast too.
Good. We're all Thor buds here.
Yeah, we are. Garrett, is this a low-key fun Christmas movie for you?
I really think it is. I mean, Shane Black, obviously weaves Christmas into all of his movies. That's a very big theme of his too. And
Yeah.
again, I think just Christmas as kind of like a quote character. It's always funny when you say things like that are not actual humans as characters. New York being the number one character that isn't a human. But digression aside, Christmas really does work because it is a time when you are gathered together with other people. Feelings of loneliness are also heightened, which is clearly on display here with how Tony feels so alone and feels like he is so wrapped up in his work too. And also, just the holidays are a lot of times where people spend in reflection and just looking back on themselves too, which obviously Tony is doing with both his life, the demons he's created, and New York too. So Christmas as a backdrop to this movie, I think just does a great job just emphasizing the themes of this movie too.
You do come prepared. That was a great monologue.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it.
I was expecting just a simple yes or no, but
Oh, it's a yes and with me.
yeah, no, that's why you're a great guest, Garret.
Thank you.
Anton, let's go into the production history of this.
Let's dive in.
I'm going to try to blow through this because I have a feeling that the discussion points are going to be chunky. So, following the release of Iron Man 2, a conflict between Paramount Pictures, which had distribution rights to certain Marvel properties, and the Walt Disney Company, Marvel Entertainment's then new corporate parent, clouded the timing and the distribution agreement of a possible third film. Later in 2010, Walt Disney Studios agreed to pay Paramount at least $115 million for the distribution rights to Iron Man 3, with Disney, Marvel, and Paramount announcing a release date of May 3rd, 2013. Now, shortly after the release of Iron Man 2, Jon Favreau publicly stated that he would not be returning to direct the third one. And Anton, if you recall, on that episode where we covered Iron Man 2, we discussed how unhappy Favreau had been with the studio for what he saw as interfering with his vision for the film. Robert Downey Jr. personally asked Shane Black to write and direct this film. Now, the pair had first worked together on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang back in 2005, which, if anyone hasn't seen it, is an excellent film and I highly recommend it.
It was fun because with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, it was a bit of a return for Robert Downey Jr., right? Back into the mainstream.
Yeah, that was the beginning of his comeback.
I love Kiss Kiss Bang Bang so much. And who's the other guy?
Great
Val
movie.
Kilmer, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So good. So good.
So much fun.
So much fun. Anyway.
And technically, Anton, that is eligible for our podcast because it was a box office bomb.
Ooh, underrated masterpiece.
It's a great film. It really is. Downey said in regards to this film, quote, bringing in Shane Black to write and direct Iron Man 3 to me is basically the only transition from Favreau to a next thing that Favreau and the audience and Marvel and I could ever actually sign off on, end quote. Drew Pearce was hired by Marvel to work on Black for the screenplay. Now, Shane Black described his take on the film as not being, quote, two men in Iron Man suits fighting each other, end quote, and more like, quote, a Tom Clancy thriller, end quote, with Iron Man fighting real-world type villains. I don't know about that, but we'll get to that a bit later. Drew Pearce said that they would avoid magic in space, with Iron Man 3 being a, quote, techno thriller set in a more real world than even the Avengers, end quote. I don't know about that either. We'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
The film's plot is primarily influenced by Extremis, the 2005 Iron Man comic storyline written by Warren Ellis. You two nerds, any Extremis thoughts?
It was a pretty important storyline for the comics just because it was one of the most popular storylines for Iron Man that had been written in a long time. And then Warren Ellis, just great writer, a well-renowned comic writer who wrote The Authority, well known for also doing the Ultimates run of the Avengers.
I have nothing to add, but I love The Authority. I have read many of those issues, and I'm very excited to see what James Gunn brings to the screen with them. That is all I have to add to that.
Not being a nerd, I have no comment.
Well, you'll see ads for it, man. The Authority,
Yeah.
and you're like, isn't that Superman and Batman?
They did that already, didn't they?
Well, that's the thing. The Authority was Warren Ellis's vision of the Justice League if they decided to just go authoritarian.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Huh, okay.
Very,
Well, it's probably
very
better than the
better.
movie Justice League because that was a pile of crap.
Oh, that is a big steaming pile of crap.
Yeah, that was not
Man.
this film.
No, it's not. No, you're right. I will get back on topic, Anton. I'm sorry. The initial draft had Maya Hansen herself leading the villainous operation, with the Mandarin and Killian emerging as antagonists in later versions of the script. During one of the writing sessions, Pierce suggested that the Mandarin was a fake, and Black agreed by going with him going with making him an actor, which in turn Pierce detailed as an overacting British stage performer. According to Black, the reveal of the actual villain being Hansen was, quote, like Remington Steele. You think it's the man, but at the end, the woman has been running the whole show, end quote. Jessica Chastain was originally going to play Maya Hansen, but she had to back out due to scheduling conflicts, so Rebecca Hall was cast in her place.
Can I just say, scheduling conflicts was definitely not scheduling conflicts here.
What was it?
Apparently, she didn't want to be relegated to the side character, which Maya Hansen eventually became. And I hope we're going to get into kind of the villain-ness of this movie too. But Jessica
we sure are.
Chastain, she was like, either make me the A villain or I will have scheduling conflicts. And that's how we landed on Rebecca Hall.
That's entirely fair because Jessica Chastain is far too great of an actress to just be some side character.
Which is why she was the main villain of Dark Phoenix, a masterpiece. I'm just kidding. That movie put me to sleep every time I try to watch it.
I'm so glad I haven't seen it.
So you're saying Ben Kingsley is far too good of an actor to play a throwaway villain?
I have thoughts on Ben Kingsley.
I do too.
We'll get there.
Oh,
we will.
For the climactic tanker battle, it was originally considered that Brandt would show up in the James Bond tradition of the henchman coming back for the heroes. Instead, they chose to use Killian himself and have Pepper, whom he abused earlier, cause his downfall as a way of poetic justice. On setting the film around Christmas, Black said, quote, I think it's a sense of, if you're doing something on an interesting scale that involves an entire universe of characters, one way to unite them is to have them all undergo a common experience. There's something at Christmas that unites everybody, and it already sets a stage within the stage, that wherever you are, you're experiencing the world together. I think that also there's something just pleasing about it to me, end quote. Filming began in May 2012 at EUE Screen Gem Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina. Cinematographer John Toll opted to work with digital cameras for the first time in his career, so as he found them more convenient for visual effects heavy production. From June 4 through June 6, 2012, filming took place in Cary, North Carolina at the Epic Games headquarters and SAS Institute, with a large Christmas tree set up on the front lawn. And shooting also took place at Wilmington Airport. Now, the port of Wilmington served as a location for the oil tanker in the climactic battle, along with a soundstage recreation of the dock. And from July 19 to August 1st, 2012, filming took place on Oak Island, North Carolina, to a quote, film aerial drops over the Atlantic Ocean. The skydiving you see was done for real. Only the clouds in the planes were digital. Now, everything that takes place in Tennessee was actually filmed in North Carolina, and the production then moved to Florida. Filming took place on location in the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens in Miami and at Dania Beach. Additional filming took place in Beijing, China. The China filming did not include the main cast and crew, and the film's production was delayed following a leg injury that Downey suffered, and for certain shots they were forced to create a double for Downey. A total of 3 hours and 15 minutes of footage were shot before editing, where it was brought down to 130 minutes. Chris Townsend served as visual effects supervisor for the film, which featured over 2,000 visual effects shot and was worked by over 17 studios.
Question for you both. Have either of you seen the Chinese version of this film?
Yes, and I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of thoughts on it, but it's interesting that Disney did this.
Got to make that money somehow.
I was going to say it's interesting is one way to put it.
Yeah. It has no bearing on the plot whatsoever.
No bearing on the plot, an extra scene, and basically just extra title cards in the credits.
Yeah.
That's it.
I actually kind of think there should be a Chinese version of every film, though, where they just insert random characters. Like Lord of the Rings.
Is it a Thai beer? I forget what it is. It's like a Thai beer or just Asian beer.
Is it Sing Sao?
No, it's not Tsingtao, and it's going to really upset me that I can't remember it off my head. But basically, it's within a country where they don't go to commercials during movies, but they still obviously need to run the commercials. So they basically shoot these fake scenes. So it'd be like Luke, like basically Darth Vader telling Luke that he's his father, and then it just cuts to like Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Beer, and it's killing
me.
Check
out this Exxon Mobil powered lightsaber.
Yes, and it's literally that with this like Laotian or Thai. I really feel awful that I'm just naming random Eastern Asian countries right now. I feel like I'm doing my own Mandarin bit right here.
But it's during like the TV broadcast of the films. They just added in. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I remember seeing that. That's hilarious.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yes, the Chinese version of this episode. This is the first Iron Man film to gross $1 billion. It was the second Marvel film to do so after the Avengers. It was the fourth fastest film to reach the milestone. Paramount Pictures received 9% of the box office gross. I have a trivia question for both of you, box office trivia. So Iron Man 3 was the second highest grossing film of 2013. What was the first?
Shrek 3.
Frozen. Easy. Next question.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, Frozen. Yeah.
Shrek 3?
Big.
Shrek 3 is not even close.
Shrek 3 came out in like, what, 07?
Yeah.
Shrek 4 was already out.
Shrek the Fourth. Oh, man. And Anton, this is where we are going to have to do a first for the podcast. We have a new advertiser.
We'll be back after
these messages brought to our Aspire sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel.
And we're back.
And we're back. It's time to talk about why wasn't it better?
The band's playing.
You need a funky bass line. Yeah, insert a funky bass line right there.
I might be able to. We'll get Eric to whip something up. Number one reason you got to start with the Mandarin. This is the film's most polarizing piece. You're either bothered by the Mandarin twist or you're not. I found it dumb.
I mean, what have we learned about Hollywood then when it actually comes to try to take a brave stance on something or try to take something creative for the mass audiences? They just end up being cowards.
I like the twist. I'm sorry. I like the twist.
So you were a fan.
Okay, I'll dive deeper into this. I love the twist of the Mandarin, aka Ben Kingsley, being a red herring. What I don't like is that it's a red herring for Aldrich Killian, who is probably the most nebbish, like weak-minded dude to actually be behind it all. And I will say this now, Maya Hansen not being the ultimate bad guy just sucks. Like, Rebecca Hall was done dirty. It should have been either her and Killian kind of in cahoots together, or just Killian as like the front, like slattery type of character, the patsy, with Maya as the Mandarin too. She's the one who built Extremis. She's the one who's actually had the real dalliance and real backstory with Star. And Killian, I mean, I'm sure you're going to get into it. The reason why they changed it was because female villains don't sell toys, which is why we are these male villains. But I love the twist, but I hate how it is actually executed because of who's actually behind it all. That's my real grievance with the twist, if that makes sense.
No, that's fair.
I had a different reason for hating it. I actually have several reasons for hating it. I was at least astute enough to realize, like, oh, the Ten Rings, that was the organization that kidnapped Tony in the first film. And then they do a very poor job of connecting this movie to that. So by the end of it, I was confused. I was like, wait a minute. So does this mean Aldrich Killian was the person behind Tony's kidnapping in the first film?
And then it also gets even more confusing when you talk about Shang-Chi with the Mandarin being Wenwu. Right. And do they have any ties to Iron Man 1? And then obviously there's the one shot, which is kind of, the larger post-credit scene of All Hail the King. But you're right. In the context of this movie and at the time what we knew in 2013, it creates a lot more holes than it does answering questions.
Also, my other question is, so did Killian do this whole AIM DNA hacking scheme because Tony was mean to him in 1999?
Yes.
Yep, that was basically it.
Yep, that is literally it. Okay. He was just jealous.
Pretty stupid.
Yeah, it is. That's, again, why I will say it for the trillionth bajillion time, and I will probably say it a few more times during this podcast. Should have just been Maya Hansen. Way more motivation, and she's the scientist who actually creates Extremis versus Killian just running a think tank that funds it.
Killian stinks.
He is terrible, and I understand that he is, part of like the military-industrial complex, which is really what is kind of a recurring theme throughout all of Iron Man's movies. But it just doesn't work for me. And that is, as much as I do like this movie, it really is just still, like, even on rewatch, something that is hard to get past.
Wasn't everybody cool with Ben Kingsley? In the trailers and everything, you're like, well, that looks cool.
I remember being
I understand he's not Chinese. I understand that, but I was really excited to see the magic versus science thing.
One thing I will say, though, about Ben Kingsley, he is always ambiguously some ethnicity that he is not in movies that he is in. So I
It's
guess it
true.
is kind of perfect casting in that sense.
Well,
And
yeah.
they do purposely make him like the archetype of like what Americans perceive a terrorist as on purpose. So again, that's where I'm like, what Killian does to that patsy of the Mandarin, I think is very interesting and kind of like preys on those fears and anxieties of especially a post 9/11 world. But again, Killian just being our suave white dude in classic foil to Stark, like it just undermines and ruins it and cheapens that twist because of who's actually behind it all.
I'm going to say this several times in this episode, and I don't want to offend him, but Guy Pearce, I don't like you. Sorry.
Not
I
a
don't.
Memento
And
man.
we just lost a subscriber.
Oh yes.
I don't like him. He's
But
a B movie actor to me, except for LA Confidential.
LA Confidential and Memento, and yeah, he
Eh,
just
I'll pass on Memento.
Hot take.
Have either of you guys like Google searched? I mean, Garrett, I know you know, but Pat, have you Google searched the Mandarin just to see what he originally looked like?
Yes.
Pat, did you know there's a character in Marvel called Fu Manchu, and the Mandarin is more Fu Manchu than Fu Manchu is Fu Manchu?
I do know that. Here's what I was expecting when I was going into this movie. This was set up for me by my Marvel consigliere at the time. This person explained to me this is going to open the door to Doctor Strange and the magic elements of the MCU. And then they explained to me there's this whole magic aspect to the MCU that I was previously unaware of. Because remember, at this point, I had seen the first two Iron Mans, I had seen Thor, I had seen Captain America. I had no knowledge of this side of Marvel, right? So I was really excited to see that in this film. So I don't want to make this entirely about like, well, it just didn't meet my expectations, right? Because I think the villain that we got was like a Disney Channel movie villain. Just not very interesting. There's nothing very interesting to me about Killian. And this is the thing. This is my biggest problem with it. I want to come back to what the screenwriter Drew Pearce said about they didn't want the story to include, quote, magic and space, end quote. I have a couple problems with that. Number one, this is a movie that is post-Avengers. So we already have a space portal opened, right? An alien invasion by this point. All of the quote-unquote realism in the MCU was long gone. Second, choosing the Mandarin as your villain, that's a pretty strange choice when you want to avoid magic. Now, I understand we don't really get the Mandarin. It's a joke in this movie. Third, the extremist virus, to me, is every bit as ridiculous as space portals and infinity stones and all that crap, right? They're talking about they didn't want to do magic. And then you have a villain who literally breathes fire.
I forgot he breathed fire. Yeah, that's true. So here's my question for you both. Let's keep the whole Patsy character. Ben Kingsley is just, an actor who is may or may not charging for favors on the street before getting hired for this job. But let's say he was playing some other random, Iron Man B-type villain. Would that make the twist better if it wasn't the Mandarin? Because I totally agree with your point. Like, I was expecting full-on magic, like tie-in from Asgard, like things like that too. And just what I've known from reading comics and watching the TV shows kid. But if, let's say, Trevor Slattery was some other villain, not the Mandarin, would that make the twist better because of who he is?
I don't think so, and I think there really is a bit of fan service in terms of being able to make it the Mandarin without actually being the Mandarin. I think there was
100%.
It was a challenge being able to write a character like that because, I did say there was a lot of cowards in Hollywood wanting to have a wide mass appeal, but it really is like a very fine line of how do you actually write this character and cast this character properly. I mean, look what they did with the Ancient One. So I think at the end of the day, there's actually, even from my perspective, just a very practical reason why you don't want to go with a Mandarin character for this film. I mean, Pat, you mentioned the Infinity Stones, but the Mandarin's rings in the comic book were essentially like the Infinity Stones.
Right, which is why I don't understand their hesitation to include the magical elements of the character of the Mandarin in here. That door was already opened. in the previous films.
And what I'm saying is, if you have something that's already really close to a villain can put on like these gems on like a gauntlet and use them for their powers, it's essentially like the Mandarin just putting on his rings to use for and using them as powers. They totally wrote it differently in the Shang-Chi film, but I think like practical reasons they were like, how do we write this a little bit differently? But
And also,
yeah.
having a magic character like the Mandarin, which, again, up to this point, the only thing we know about Ten Rings is basically a terrorist organization in the Middle East and basically Ben Kingsley and Aldrich Killian. We don't know about like Wenwu and the actual magic behind and the connection, obviously, with the post-credit scene in Shang-Chi with Wong analyzing the rings too. But for comic book readers, it kind of puts the movie already at odds. And especially the screenplay. It's a very character-driven screenplay, but we know there is effectively this mythical character. It kind of does put those grounded elements at odds with, for lack of better words, like space and magic elements too. So people come into maybe that movie with a bit of a bias or like a preconceived notion of what might be happening, as Pat, your Marvel consigliere of the time, might have said.
He did. Also, they kind of undermined Killian for me because in the opening prologue, which takes place in 1999, I don't know how to sound mean when I say this, though, but like his character was so funny. He instantly reminded me of Lee Evans playing the fake crippled guy in There's Something About Mary.
That's such a good reference right there.
I just started laughing. I was like, wait, who is that Guy Pearce? Like, what's going on here?
They do a good job of like uglifying Guy Pearce, who, thoughts about his movies aside, Pat, like we can all agree, like he is a good-looking man.
He's a handsome man.
He is a handsome man. He's wearing some suits in this movie. And, like his hair is slicked back. I'm like, I wish I could pull off that look.
You know why I don't like him in this movie? You know who I wanted to see in this? And there's a way that they could have done this. Chow Yun-fat was just sitting right there. It's like one of the best actors in the world. Like, why just not make him the Mandarin? We already know based on what they did with Shang-Chi, there's a way to make the character Asian and have it not be a stereotype. Yeah. They can do it. They did it.
And Chow Yun-fat already has a relationship with Disney.
He does. He was in he had basically a cameo in the Pirates of the Caribbean sequel.
But you know what? It really is kind of like, and obviously we're talking about Shang-Chi in the lens of this film, but trying to keep in the 2013 lens. But Shang-Chi is kind of retconning almost like a lot of these like stereotypes and just misfortunes and just honestly missteps that the Iron Man movies took. And, Iron Man's classic villains are those, Fing Fang Foom, a giant dragon, and, the leader of the Ten Rings, the Mandarin too. And now Shang-Chi is using that in his movies too, which I think totally works for the cinematic equivalent too. But again, at the time, like I feel like all of this discourse was, fairly earned. Same thing with the ancient one as well. And to your point before, it feels fan servicey, but just in a really ingenuous way. Ingenuous, that's a word, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a word.
We'll allow it.
A lot of ingenuity. We'll go with the adverb. Just
there you go. I would have been fine with the twist if the payoff was worth it, and I don't think it was. Killian's just a very boring, vanilla character to me.
Yeah, and the last thing I will say, just kind of counterpoint to it, this was the first time Marvel did do a twist like this to this degree in their films. So I will at least give credit for taking the swing, but I do think they kind of chickened out with Killian being the main villain. But again, do appreciate the fact that they were still willing to kind of take swings like this at this point.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's why although I don't like the twist, I don't think it was a complete failure. I appreciate that Shane Black and Marvel were trying to do something different than the first two films.
I blame Mike Perlmutter for everything and everything always.
I'm glad you mentioned him. You're reading my mind because they kind of did it dirty. You're right. Like it should have been Maya Hansen as the main villain, especially if Jessica Chastain's in that role. That is so much more interesting.
Even Rebecca Hall, who's a great actress at this point too. It's just the character of Maya Hansen is nothing. And she goes out like such a wimp. She just gets shot and then boom, she's out of the movie.
Has nothing to do.
Yeah.
Nothing to do. Nothing to do.
I do like the part though, when she comes to Tony's house and what is she like? She mentions the one night stand and then Tony's like, and it was great. And she was like, eh.
The eye roll that she gives to Pepper too, it's just such a great back and forth right there.
It was a really interesting time too, looking at the trailers and all the hype for this film. The fact that the Iron Patriot armor was included, it actually opened up a lot of theories around were we going to get Norman Osborn in the film
Oh,
somehow.
oh
You remember
man, if
that,
we get
Garrett?
like Thunderbolts, like I thought we were getting Thunderbolts like in 2013 already. I was like, we're getting Norman Osborn. I'm like, what is going on?
And then, of course, it didn't happen. It wouldn't have made sense, but I think that was part of the magic back then. This was very, very early Marvel, and anything was possible. But
Pat's like, you nerds.
No, Anton knows what a nerd I am. Maybe not for Marvel stuff, but some of the James Bond stuff, I can tell. Like Anton's like, all right, dude, just shut up.
no,
Like,
Pat, I love the
Hey.
passion.
I know, you do. Yeah.
Hey, for what it's worth, I would say Iron Man is the closest we have to like a Bond type, like archetype in the MCU. We got the one-liners, the quips, the gadgets, the tools, and this is a very Bond movie of him just kind of, improvising and making do with what he has. So you know what? We can get into Bond and let that nerdum fly here.
Where are you at on James Bond, Garrett? Where are you on your journey with Bond?
I love it. Big fan of all the Bonds. The Brosnan ones obviously grew up with, and I just have a soft spot for every single one. But, Casino Royale 06 remains unmatched to me.
It's flawless.
Flawless. I love it.
Fantastic film.
I mean, I have some thoughts about how they play poker, but you don't need to hear about my gambling on this podcast.
We might have to have you on for a Bond movie then.
Oh, happily.
So are you down for any of the Roger Moores?
I love the Roger Moore ones. Give me them all.
So much fun. Can I interest you in Man with the Golden Gun?
Oh, yes. And obviously playing Golden Guns only on GoldenEye 64 and just watching your friends try not to beat the crap out of each other. Great childhood memory.
Shouts out GoldenEye.
Shouts out.
Fantastic. Once someone got the RCP-90, it was all over.
Oh my god, game over there. Also, didn't like the AK literally look just like kind of like an eyeliner pencil, like the actual like gun itself? Do you know what I mean? Like it just looks
The
like
KF-7 Soviet?
Yeah, thank you, that one, not the AK.
Well,
sorry.
there were.
How do I remember
You know
that?
what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well,
Of course.
When you actually look at images of how a lot of things actually looked up close for GoldenEye and how it rendered, it didn't always necessarily look exactly like
Those
we may have in
64
our
bits
memory.
were working overtime.
But
No,
it worked.
that game was groundbreaking, not necessarily for its graphics, but the gameplay.
Exactly.
But we're no stranger to James Bond on this podcast. Anyway, reason number 2 why Iron Man 3 wasn't better, the Tony Stark stuff. One of the other polarizing parts about this film is how little we actually get of Iron Man. And Garrett, this is where I'll boost this film for you. I actually like this very much about the film.
Thank you.
I like that this is a Tony Stark film. This is the part of the film that I like the best. All of the Tony stuff works for me so well.
I could not agree more, and I'm very glad you say this too. Anton, I'm very curious to kind of hear your thoughts on this, but like one thing I will say, like the Act 1 here, the only time we see the suits come into play is literally Tony getting his diagnostics checked during a panic attack, basically pulling a Dr. Manhattan on Pepper, giving her a massage, and then Pepper trying to kiss him, and he's like, you could kiss my
Dr.
face
Manhattan.
slit.
Oop, it doesn't work.
But also when he says kiss my face slit, that is just like, I feel like I want to throw up even just saying that to you guys right now. And then, yeah, the last time his suits appear, it's when his house is basically blown to bits by the Mandarin, and he throws it onto Pepper and uses it to save himself from drowning. And I just love that it goes so deep into actual Tony Stark's ingenuity. The raid on the compound in Miami is just so fun and just so inventive to me too. And I just love how it, again, the movie really highlights, is it the man that makes the suit or the suit that makes the man? And just is such a great deconstruction of everything from the id, the ego, and superego too. I will get into like my Freudian thoughts about this, but I love how much Tony Stark and how little Iron Man, and by extension Iron Patriot, is in this movie.
It's my favorite thing about the film, like I said. It's answering the question when Captain America asks Tony this in the Avengers, like, what are you without that suit? This film answers that.
Yes, perfectly said.
That's why I will go to bat for this film in spite of the problems that I have with it. His PTSD, his relationship with Pepper, all the scenes with the kid in the barn, like that's the heart and soul of this film. And like this, all the action stuff in the suit, that's all great, but we had gotten that. We got it in the first film, the second film, we got plenty of it in the Avengers, we would get plenty more of it, but it all comes down to Downey, right? This is a really well-written character story. Downey is superb in this role. It's probably the best work he's done in the MCU. I would say this or maybe Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And then I liked the whole subplot of him having to go to the mattresses. We never seen him this vulnerable before. After his house gets blown up, I was riveted. I was like, whoa, this is like not what this is the part of the movie like where the Mandarin was not what I was expecting, and that was a disappointment. This part of it was not what I was expecting, but in the opposite way. I was riveted by this stuff. I thought it was great storytelling.
You know, this movie really does have that tension that Tony might not make it out and in one piece
Mhm.
throughout pretty much the entire movie. You know, everything from a basic panic attack while having lunch with Rhodes all the way till like that frenetic finale where he can't even be in a suit for longer than a second. It really does make him feel exposed and almost naked as a character throughout the movie there.
His performance is so good here.
I think this is the best like Robert Downey Jr. performance out of all of the Iron Man movies by a country mile.
Well, he would agree with you.
I mean,
because
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Anton.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, even when you think of each of the Iron Man films, Robert Downey Jr. is just so amazing at being able to really demonstrate Tony Stark's growth. And you really feel that here in this film, right? And you can't really, you may not know it going in as a kid, but especially when for younger audiences may not know about Robert Downey Jr.'s past, but when you see Robert Downey Jr. really portray being able to overcome, being able to really grow as a character, probably really does touch upon his very, difficult past.
It had to be a very cathartic kind of like filming for him in that sense too.
It seems that it was, and he would agree with you, Garrett and Anton, because Downey said about this film, quote, "I felt so exposed after being in the cocoon of Marvel where I think I did some of the best work I will ever do, but it went a little bit unnoticed because of the genre," end quote.
Wait, I love that he uses that word cocoon too, because a lot of people kind of talk about it being like, two people in the suit, like his Iron Man character and Tony Stark character. But really, I think this movie kind of uses like his Iron Man suits as like a cocoon that he's kind of wrapped up in, and he needs to break out and become the quote unquote butterfly too. And like obviously that's bookended in this movie with him saying, "I am Iron Man," but it having a different meaning than when he said it the first time in 2008's Iron Man, is that he kind of is able to kind of get back to almost like his sense of self too. And his id and his super ego are not at odds too, and really influencing his ego itself. I just think the movie showcases a really good job showing how the suits are kind of a cocoon that he needed to break free from and really kind of understand himself. So
yeah,
I just can't say enough good things about that character driven aspect.
Yeah, I mean, even just thinking about how the suit manifests itself is really just continuing on that same metaphor. It's not just Iron Man putting on the suit. The suit is a part of his, DNA.
Yes. And I think that's like such a great point too. And one thing I will say about the suits in this movie, and I want to hear if you guys agree, I know this is a little bit of a digression, but this is like the last time to me, like the suits really felt like they had a weight to it. The tech almost just gets like too good for its own self by the time Civil War rolls around. And I mean, Age of Ultron doesn't really have a suit up scene, so we can't really use that. But like by the time Civil War rolls around, like it just feels pure CGI to me.
I mean, it's just you'll notice this too after Iron Man 3 on. There's way less suits of armor being put on or helmets getting taken on or off.
Yes.
It suddenly just becomes like, oh, they appear extremist little nanobot helmets, and like you said, it takes away the weight of the costumes, or it takes away the weight of their outfits.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think it's really cool what he can do with all the nanotech, but again, that's just kind of like, lazy writing and a convenient script for him doing what the script needs him to do.
I don't have anything in the notes about the CGI, but rewatching this earlier today, the CGI in here is great. It doesn't feel obtrusive
like
at all. Yeah, it really did. This is it's a well-filmed movie. Well, I have something about John Toll. I don't know if either of you are familiar with him.
Well, I know that this was like his first time shooting on digital. That's really like the only thing I know about him with this movie.
Well, he knew what he was doing. He won back-to-back Oscars for shooting Legends of the Fall and Braveheart.
Mm-hmm.
He also shot The Thin Red Line, The Last Samurai, The Tropic Thunder. Very experienced director of photography.
Didn't he also do Cloud Atlas too? Which
I
I'm
think he
a big
did.
fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did that one too.
Yeah.
Oh, now
But
I'm
yeah,
looking
the
at his
CGI in here is
filmography.
great. Like, there's a lot. Like, Garrett, you mentioned when Tony storms the Miami compound, and he's got the one part of his armor suit, I think,
Oh,
like the
Mhm.
gauntlet.
Yep.
I know
There's a ton of
exactly.
CGI being used there, and it's so seamlessly blended into the action. It's a great use of practical effects and a great use of CGI at the same time. It's great.
There is a great shot right there when he has basically I think it's his right arm's armor and his left leg, and he basically pushes himself off towards the wall, flips himself on the ground, uses his like rocket booster on the left leg, and the camera does like a 90-degree twist of him getting up onto a platform and just blasting a guy, and it's just like such a smooth CGI transition. And
Yes.
I'm like, I rewinded that shot like 5 times. And I'm like, I just love like how inventive this is on digital, just to like rotate the camera like that 90 degrees. And it doesn't look like soup, for lack of better words.
I think what it all comes down to, of why all the Tony stuff works so well, is look at the guy who wrote the screenplay and who directed the movie. He is a story first guy. He's associated with action films, but he's not what you'd call an action director. He's a story guy. He's a writer.
Could not agree more. I mean, yes, I have a lot of thoughts on his terrible Predator movie from 2018, but I think that's really where he kind of gets away from his bag, for lack of better terms.
That wasn't the best.
It's a film.
It's a film. We don't have to
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about it at
No.
all.
Back to the Tony Stark stuff. I also absolutely, as usual, loved seeing his chemistry with Gwyneth Paltrow. They
Mhm.
feel like a real couple. It's real chemistry. I love every minute that they're on screen together. I love their banter. I could have watched more movies with just the two of them. It's just two great actors doing their thing. I liked seeing her as CEO. That was pretty satisfying.
And I
You know,
think
it's a nice continuity that they started to build up in the first film, and they never abandoned it.
And you know what? I think her being a CEO and just obviously her rising to her positions of power really does affect Tony and a lot of his PTSD too. Like, he's already so wrapped up in not dealing with his own stuff that he can't be there for others like Pepper and Happy, and is basically putting them in danger by proxy too. But he is just so not present with like their situations that he is just not able to connect with them too. So your heart really does break for them because you can clearly see like how on different pages they are too. And just one little thing that I really loved in that scene where his suit attacks her in his sleep when he's having nightmares about New York, he breaks the suit down, which, by the way, such a great little like physical cue of how Downey does that. And the suit is basically broken down right in front of Pepper. And to me, it's effectively just symbolizing like how Tony, is just broken into pieces right in front of Pepper. And he doesn't know how to be whole, and he doesn't know how to ask for that help. And I just think that's just such like a beautiful scene and is so nuanced, but that it just kind of goes over people's heads and they don't realize it there. And I find it so heartbreaking, that like little scene.
It's a great scene.
Yep.
One of the other things unrelated to this, but in the same scene, is the artwork on Tony Stark's bedroom wall, painted by Nancy Eccles, one of my favorite artists.
Ooh, are we about to do an architectural digest?
A little bit.
Digression for Tony Stark's house?
A little bit. Yeah, she's Nancy Eccles is a very talented artist, and a couple of her works are in Tony Stark's house in this film.
The one thing I do not know a lot about is art, so I'm just gonna have to say it all looked great to me.
I know a little bit. Also, I want to talk about Tony's wine cellar.
Oh, can we? Yes.
Yeah, if we could just take a couple minutes here.
Yes,
Very well stopped.
for all you listeners,
yeah.
Pat was drinking a lovely glass of red before. I'm expecting him to tell us all about the region, the tannins, the flavor notes, and profile. But yes, I am very curious to hear your take on Tony's wine cellar.
Well, I am drinking a California Cabernet, which seems to be what Tony Stark favors. There's some big names that he has. It's very appropriate for his character, I think. Very heavy on the Napa cabs. I spotted some 100 Acre, some SQN, some Jordan, some Schaefer, some Camus. There was Colgan. There was Scarecrow and Screaming Eagle. That's really hard to find stuff. Very, very expensive stuff. I also saw a case of Celaya. This is one of the joys of being able to see this in 4K. You can spot all this stuff.
Is this the moment like where you just paused and you were just picking out things in the frame right here?
I did. I may or may not have been taking screenshots on my phone.
No Josh Sellers though. No Josh Sellers.
No, there was no Josh Sellers.
Yeah, no.
No.
Doesn't seem like a
No.
Tony thing to drink.
No, it doesn't. But I would say
And
if you're interested in getting into the Tony Stark wine world, the most affordable stuff that you can find, you can go with Jordan or Schaefer. You can get a nice bottle of their Cabernet for like 60, $70, or Camus, which is around the same price, but maybe
we
a little
really
bit
should
more.
have my fiance on. She works in the alcohol industry and is very educated about wine too. So I feel like she would be very interested in this part of the episode.
Why would I have not been surprised if he just moved a bottle and there'd also just be a box of Franzia?
It is cooking wine. It's great cooking wine.
It is great cooking wine.
Anton, what's your favorite type of wine? Are you a red, a white, an orange guy? What are we talking?
I do love me some white wine, a nice dry white wine.
Ooh,
It's the time of year for it, my friend.
It is. It is. Pat, what about you?
I like red and white pretty equally. I obviously tend to drink white more in the summer. I like a nice Albarino. I like a nice Sauvignon Blanc.
Mm.
And here's a really deep cut for you wine enthusiasts out there. My favorite white grape is called a Malaguzia. It is a grape from Greece. Perfectly dry, perfectly minerally, perfect for summer.
Listeners, take notes right here. This is a cultured man.
I like wine. It's my go-to type of alcoholic beverage. I usually go towards wine.
I have been
didn't when I was younger, but I feel like it's something. Once you hit your 30s, you really learn to appreciate wine.
I'm with you. I've been getting into pet knots. Big fan of those.
What is it?
Pet knots, kind of the fermented wine.
Oh, I don't think I've had that.
Very kombucha like, a lot of like fizzy fermentation, a lot of sediment. I just love that kind of taste too. It really just pops.
You said pet knots. I was like, I wonder if it's like garlic knots.
No, it's not garlic knots.
Not at
But
all.
I would eat it with garlic knots.
Ah, okay.
Yes. Fizzy, fun, and funky would be the 3 words I would use to describe it.
Sounds like some Harry Potter stuff.
Oh, yes, I'm sure. Hermione would definitely be a pet knot. You know who drinks pet knots? Ravenclaw.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. That's a callback, people.
All right, moving on. Continuing why wasn't it better? The story. This is just general thoughts. In the prologue, I enjoyed seeing Yinsen at the party in Switzerland. That was cool.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a very full circle film, so
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It was just nice to see them actually close the loop on that.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the movie kind of being told kind of in flashbacks and being kind of bookended like that too. But yeah, seeing my boy Jensen, the guy who basically started the MCU, whether we want to admit it or not. So
He
we
did.
love you. We love you, Ho Jensen. R.I.P. my man.
Yeah, he didn't make it out of that cave.
mm.
Here's my biggest disappointment with the film. We have several characters asking each other, "Can you regulate?"
Mount up.
There's no
Nate
Warren
Dogg.
G joke in the film. Like, what the hell?
Right? No Nate Dogg, no Warren. Literally, thank you, Pat. I had that in my notes too. I'm so glad.
Yeah,
you said
what
that.
what were they thinking? It was a clear black night, a clear white moon. Happy Hogan was on the streets trying to consume.
Kevin Feige, if you're listening to this right now,
What the hell? Like,
come on, man.
very disappointed in that.
Extremis to me is I think it's such a cool power, but I don't also understand how the only time we have seen it since is in Secret Invasion, which was used terribly. We don't have to talk about Secret Invasion at all. But also, Extremis is just kind of lazy plot writing, too. Like, people can regrow when they're blown up, but, that guy Savin gets a little chunk blown out of his midsection and he's dead. I don't know. It's just very inconsistently done throughout the movie, too. And just seems to be
But
a
remember,
strong plot.
we can't have magic or anything crazy in the movie.
Right. You're right. I forgot. My bad.
Yeah, I did like the action in this a lot. All the stuff in Tennessee was awesome when he's on the run.
A lot of people really don't like the Tennessee because, again, it is not a quote Iron Man scene there too. But again, I think it does.
Really? I thought it was great.
Right. Well, let's be honest. I think also when you bring a little kid into a movie, it's like, all right, here's this little precocious, snot-nosed kid, and he's going to drag this movie down. But I think the movie does such a good job because Tony is the biggest jerk possible to this kid at every single moment in the movie.
He is.
Okay, what's the line he says to him too? He's like, "Dad's leave. No need to be a pussy about it." Like,
Yes. Yeah.
and then when he's
Oh,
leaving, he's like, "Are you gonna leave me like my dad did?" Yes. Like, honestly, the Tennessee is such a great job. I love it so much.
but really, it was North Carolina. Shout out.
Right, Tennessee by ways of North Carolina.
I love the scene where he blows up that woman with the microwave. Pretty badass.
He's got like quite a Bond line in there too, where he, what does she say? She's like, "Is that all you've got? A cheap trick and a cheesy one-liner?" And he goes, "Sweetheart, that could be the name of my autobiography." Like, that is just a top tier, like, just line and comeback right there.
Great Shane Black line.
Great Shane Black line too, and honestly, just such an inventive, like, again, Tony Stark, like, man without the suit, just being totally just ingenuity, showcasing it in how he like handles himself.
One of the things I felt they failed to address, like, does anyone care that a terrorist blew up Tony Stark's mansion in Malibu?
I mean, I figure
It's
they're
just
probably
not really
like,
addressed.
a lot of folks around are like, he could afford another.
You would just think like the U.S. government would be all over that, and they're like, eh.
There is a lot of like kind of blasé attitude towards terrorism in this movie.
Yeah, you would just think like some of the other Avengers would maybe be involved in that. Like someone blew up Tony Stark's house. Like, oh no. You would also think that the vice president planning to assassinate the president would have been a bigger deal.
You know, you would think that, like, okay, when the Mandarin calls or basically does that telecast and it's like, "I have this Roxxon account and I'm going to kill him," President Ellis basically asked the VP like how the terrorist got his cell phone number. Like, shouldn't he kind of expect maybe somebody's in on it? Which, you know,
Right.
love Miguel Ferrer, R.I.P. You're the man.
Bob
But
Morton.
yes, Bob. Oh, God, I love RoboCop. But yeah, there's just a lot of like, guys, could we just use just like a modicum of our brain here, just a little bit.
Yeah. President William Sadler.
Great villain in Die Hard 2. Great villain.
It's okay.
All right.
Die Hard 2 is on our list for this year for Christmas.
Understandably.
Yeah, we can talk about that later.
Oh yeah.
Air Force One rescue scene is my favorite action scene in the whole film.
When the score kicks in after Stark
Mhm.
saves them all,
Fantastic.
I am fist pumping. I was literally watching this on my couch at like 10 a.m. today, and I just had like my fist like going when that score just kicks in with the drums too.
It easily could have been very cheesy, but very well executed because of everything tied together.
Literally and figuratively. I
It
could not
really
agree
is.
more. And you know what? Like, usually, like, I am the type of person who hates when all moments are kind of cut with jokes. But when the truck just hits his suit and it's revealed that he was like piloting it, basically from the boat, I just think it's such a little well done moment too. I love that whole Air Force One scene. It's so cool.
Like I said, it's my favorite thing in the film. It's great.
Easily. And then you don't really have a minute to breathe because the next scene, you're basically into the finale. So it's kind of the last 40 minutes of the movie. It's just like go, go, go
Was that before or after the Miami compound raid?
after.
Okay, it was after. Okay.
But yeah,
I
to your point though, it goes Miami compound raid and then just kind of the quick breather scene of Killian being like, "I am the man behind it all." And then it's just boom, boom, boom. So that movie really starts to like go 0 to 100, starting with the Miami compound scene.
And then where Guy Pearce yells diplomatic immunity at the end at the shipyard.
He feels like, you know, like a character in Civilization with how
Anton
stocky
got
he
it.
is.
Because we've never ended an action film like that before.
Lethal
Anton got that
Weapon.
reference. Yeah, Lethal Weapon too. Also at a shipyard with containers. I have a question about the extremist virus. So Tony just fixes it and all of the negative effects are resolved. So I guess Pepper can't die. It's never mentioned again in the MCU.
Oh, I can
They-
answer this. I can answer this, Pat.
Anton, take it away.
Yes, he does.
I know that, but like it's just never brought up again.
It is in Secret Invasion when.
The hell is that?
Okay, did you not
It's
watch
a-
Secret Invasion, the mini-series
Of
of the
course
Skrull
not.
Invasion?
No.
He did not.
Yeah, because it was terrible, and
Right,
don't watch
no.
it.
There's no way I would watch that.
The comics are amazing.
Is that even
and
canon?
It shouldn't
It
be.
sadly is.
It is.
Just for the record, I know this is not correct. I don't consider anything after Endgame canon.
honestly, for your mental sanity and time spent watching TV, it's probably a good idea. Save for a couple movies.
I don't know. I liked Hawkeye.
Dude, Hawkeye rules. Thank you.
All I know is when Tony's doing the monologue at the end, he's just like, "And I solved the extremist virus. Cool."
All right. So the one thing I will say, they actually do explain in the movie, which I caught at this time on the rewatch. The card that he gives to Maya Hansen back in Burn that says, "You know who I am," on the back, it's the extremist formula to basically solve the problem that Maya couldn't solve, that he quote unquote almost solved while he was drunk. When Maya has him in the compound and he's chained up to the bed, she's like, "You're going to help me fix it." And you're like, okay, whatever, Maya Hansen. And then at the end, he basically says to Pepper, I almost solved this 20 years ago and I was drunk. I think I could do this now. So yes, kind of lazy writing, but they do address it. And Pat, to your point, Extremis never comes back into play until the Secret Invasion show, which, and I am not making this up, Nick Fury has a vial containing literally every character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's powers. We're talking everybody from the Super Soldier Serum all the way to Captain Marvel. And he injects Emilia Clarke, who is a Skrull, with all of those powers. And she grows an arm that looks like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. And she has Extremis. And she's theoretically the most powerful being in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But we haven't heard from her since that terrible show from last year. Anyway, this has been Garrett's Comic Corner. Thank you for attending.
Wow.
Yeah, those are all real things. Those are all real things.
So now Pat really doesn't want to watch Secret Invasion.
Yeah, Anton, did I miss anything? Because
there are
no lies.
Right.
There are no lies.
That we got our Super Skrull.
Oh, yeah,
I would need $500.
I need like 500 minutes of my life back from watching that show.
You stuck through it?
Look, if there's one thing I am, it's
look. We don't have to bring it up. I can tell this is difficult for you. We don't have to.
I have conviction, and I finish what I start.
I have in my notes, I felt completely lost by the Extremist virus plot. Parts of it feel like something you'd see lampooned on Mystery Science Theater.
The worst part is Extremis is so cool in theory, but it's just so not well done at all.
Mm-mm.
It seems to me like it's something that works better on the pages of a comic book than a movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, Anton, you've read the Extremis storyline. What do you think?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a reason why it was used for one storyline. It's not like they keep revisiting it. It's not perfect. Nanotechnology becoming the actual being able to fully power whatever Iron Man abilities he has just from his body. It just starts to get a little like, where are we leveling up to? At least with the armor, you can improve the different armors, take on a different armor. But if all the armor is just in your body, I don't know how fun that is.
And especially in this movie, Extremis does what the plot needs it to do, too. So I can see why they both didn't do a great job and kind of abandon it towards the end. Yeah.
Speaking of the end, I like the clean slate protocol where Tony destroys all his suits until the next film.
Except not really.
One thing I will say, rewatching this movie too, he promises Pepper he's scaling back his tinkering. So I will say, it's not that he's fully abandoning Iron Man. He's just abandoning the idea of like just churning out as much as possible. And it does kind of give way to the Iron Legion, which is just kind of the centuries of Iron Man armor versus him piloting it. Then again, I do agree. It does feel like there is a quote unquote like plot point missing between his realization at the end of Iron Man 3 and the beginning of Age of Ultron. I do agree with that.
The thing that made me laugh more than anything else in the film, when Tony points the gun at the henchman and he's like, "These people are weird. I don't even like working here."
Is that the funniest line in Marvel?
I think it might be. It's so good. I just wanted to shout it out because I crack up every time.
That whole scene too, where he's just chained up to the bed and he's just counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The guy's like, "Oh, I'm scared. Oh, you almost got me." Like, it's just such great witty back and forth banter.
And we have Shane Black,
man.
Shane Black, baby.
What is it he asked? He asked how far they are from Tennessee.
The guy gets the exact mileage, and he goes,
like,
"I'm good like that."
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So good. Just great comedy.
Gentlemen, if either of you don't have anything to add, let's bring this home.
Let's do it.
I think I'm ready when you guys are.
Garret, you're the guest. Would you like to go first, or do you want both of us to render our verdicts before you?
You know what? I'll let you guys go first. You're the host.
Okay.
I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I think listeners by now know where I stand on this movie.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first here, Pat.
Okay.
So it's interestingly enough, Garret, you really said it early on in the episode that this was a really divisive film when it released, and it really took time and appreciation to be able to see how smart this film actually is. And it's funny because even then, this was still during a time when it's fair to say Marvel was still trying to figure out the MCU, trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to continue to progress the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, but at the same time building out the MCU, while at the same time addressing these characters in these individual films. So it's so fun to be able to like go back and see this film and look at from not only that lens, but also just the lens of that this was a very well written, very funny, and just very touching and emotional film, all in its own. And I think that this being a very full circle film in terms of being able to really address a lot of the themes and the growth of Tony Stark in a way that really only Robert Downey Jr. could do is just super impressive. And while I'll say it's not my favorite Marvel film, I think there really is a big appreciation that I have now revisiting this film and watching it, that this is part of the magic that is lost in a lot of more recent Marvel films. I think a lot of Marvel films really do look at these like really great early films as part of that template. And Iron Man 3, I think, deserves a second rewatch or another rewatch from a lot of folks that watched it back then and maybe haven't seen it in a while, because you know what? I think it is definitely worth that rewatch. So I enjoyed it. I was really happy to revisit Tony Stark and just see how awesome Robert Downey Jr. is in this role. I'm going to go ahead and say that for me, this movie's a B.
Alrighty. Well, when I first saw this film around the time that it came out, I didn't really care for it that much. I thought it was just okay. I didn't like any of the Mandarin stuff. I still don't. Aldrich Killian stinks. Guy Pearce, I'm sorry, you're not one of my 100 favorite actors, not even 200. But seeing this more now, the more I see this film, the more it grows on me. I appreciate the good things about it. This is one of those films where there's some stuff that I just really don't like about it. The villain and the DNA hacking plot, I think, are idiotic. The Mandarin twist didn't really work for me because I would have much rather seen a attempt at a faithful Mandarin character. Aldrich Killian is just a far less interesting villain, but I like this a lot more than Iron Man 2. It's one of those things where like you have to weigh the good against the bad, and how much more of the good do you like than of the bad that you don't like? I feel like this moved Tony's character and his arc forward in a very meaningful, satisfying way because of the writing of Tony Stark's character. I liked seeing him out of the suit. I liked that he had to prove himself. And that's down to the writing of Shane Black, which I think is very strong. He knows how to write characters, he knows how to write a story, and the brilliance of Robert Downey Jr. He absolutely elevates this film. In his own words, this is absolutely some of his best work. It's a brilliant performance, and all of the action scenes I think are really well done. They're really exciting. They're really well filmed. They're really well edited. I think this is a very well paced film, which I haven't mentioned yet, but I am now. I liked the score by Brian Tyler. I haven't mentioned that either. I think it's a very strong score. A lot of the Marvel movies suffer from pretty boring scores. This one was good. This was a pleasant surprise on the rewatch. It had a lot of things working in its favor. I like the good much more than the bad, and I understand the divisiveness, but for me, I think maybe it works better as a Shane Black action movie than it does as a Marvel movie, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Anton, I'm slightly behind you with a B minus. But this is a good movie. I enjoyed it. I would absolutely watch it again, and I definitely recommend it. If anyone has seen this in the past and they didn't care for it, I would say, just like you did, Anton, give it a rewatch. It's got a lot of great things in it.
I love it. I love hearing all of this. And these are all great points too, so I won't kind of echo the same things that you mentioned. But I will say, this movie at its core just feels so unique compared to the 34, 33, however many Marvel films there are today too. And you can really feel just kind of Shane Black's influence on the movie too. I also think at the same time you can feel a lot of Ike Perlmutter's and Disney's influence on this film, most notably with Maya Hansen being relegated to basically a nothing character, Aldrich Killian being a stock villain for the purpose of selling toys. And I think that's really a big miss of the two. but it's really so offset just by the general chemistry between all of the actors, especially Downey Jr. I think this is personally his best performance in any Marvel movie, too. Pat, you're so right. We didn't even talk about the score. I love the theme in this movie, too. It has those little motifs of the Avengers theme, but is still Iron Man's own theme, too, which I still think is like almost like great symbolism of the character, too. I love the end credits title sequence with that as well. I think there's just some great inventive and unique action too. And there's just so much tension kind of wrapped up in this film. And it really does a great job of saying, what does post Avengers MCU look like? While saying, let's check in on our characters too. So it does kind of function as both not only a sequel builder, but also a let's check in with our characters and take a breather from all of this madness. Again, this is one of the last movies that really doesn't feel like a CGI slop fest that was made on an assembly line that we're kind of seeing lately with Marvel 2, unfortunately. And I just have all of the praise for the swings that it takes. Again, I do think it does play some safe in some areas, and you can really feel where some corners were maybe cut, or there is some lazy script writing in service of the plot too. But overall, I just have such a fun time with this movie. There's not a dull moment for me too. And again, I really think the deconstruction of what a superhero is and really the deconstruction of Tony Stark is something that was kind of done in both of the first two movies, but is just done so effectively here as a result of what he's experienced in his adventures leading up to Iron Man 3, obviously including the Avengers. So I have nothing really bad to say outside of what I've already said about this film. It still remains a top 5 Marvel movie for me. I give it a B+, pushing towards an A-, so we'll just call it an 89.4, and we round down in that, so we'll give it a B+. But can't say enough good things about this movie. I think I've seen it probably the most out of any Marvel movie, too.
What are your top 5?
In no particular order, I will say Winter Soldier, Iron Man 3, The First Avengers, Thor Ragnarok. This is a tough one to put
And
in
the
5.
Eternals.
And the Eternals. No, probably. Did I say Civil War? Yeah, Civil War.
Yeah. No, you
Yeah,
didn't.
that's a fair one.
Civil War. Yeah, Civil War. Do you guys want to give me
Solid.
your top 5s? Yeah, let's do this. Let's just go around.
I had to
That was
think
off the
about it.
cuff.
I mean,
Oh,
they're in
man.
there, but yeah, you mentioned Civil War, Winter Soldier. I really, really love Black Panther, and then
Black Panther is 6 for me. For
Yeah.
what it's worth.
And then I really like Ragnarok, and then it's either between like Infinity War or the first Avengers film.
Okay, wait, I'm going to make one quick revision. I'm taking out Civil War, putting in Captain America, the First Avenger. I cry at the end of that movie every time when Steve just says, I had to dance. Makes me cry every time. So, making a quick revision there. And yeah, I'll admit to the listeners I cry because that's healthy.
It is healthy.
Thank you.
And that actually, it's a continuous of the theme that you plugged in the beginning of the episode.
Yeah. Bookending it, just like Tony Stark does in Iron Man 3. Look at us. So topical.
I have to give my top 5 Marvel movies.
If you want, you can go off the cuff. There's no judgment here.
Okay. This is tough. Ugh.
Just name 5 Marvel movies. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I would say probably Civil War is my favorite. Winter Soldier's pretty good. The first Avengers I really, really like. The Incredible Hulk, just kidding. It was terrible. Probably Infinity War. This is tough. I'm just not a Marvel guy.
And you're like, and Man of Steel.
Yeah,
You're like, and
maybe the first Iron Man. This is a terrible look for me.
She-Hulk: Attorney at Law.
I'm trying to think. What are the ones I actually rewatch? I would rewatch any of the Iron Mans. I would rewatch any of the Captain Americas. I would rewatch any of the Avengers except for Age of Ultron.
Punisher: Warzone.
Sure. Can we count Blade? Is that a Marvel movie?
Elektra.
It's not the MCU, but it is a Marvel movie.
But I mean, technically now isn't everything the MCU because the mouse is collecting studios like Thanos and the Infinity Stones.
You know what? It's not an MCU film, but X-Men 2.
Hell yeah.
They
are Marvel. They are Marvel characters.
Yes.
So hey, I'm gonna throw that one in there.
We just want to have fun at the movies. That's all we're asking.
Yeah. That was a terrible list, and I'm sorry. I don't watch a lot of these movies.
It's because you go outside and touch grass.
Well,
as much as I should, but
it's fair because there seems to be a theme here. We only really mention films in the MCU, at least between phases 1 and 3.
Yes.
Everything after that, we didn't say anything.
Shang-Chi,
Right.
honorable mention. Shang-Chi, honorable mention.
Yeah, agree with that.
I haven't seen any of the post of Endgame films. You know what though, and like I don't want to be pigeonholed to the MCU because Anton, like if you were asking me your top 5 Marvel movies, I know it's not a Marvel movie, but like Spider-Man 2, that's on the list.
I'm like, yes, Sam Raimi.
It's so great. It's such a great movie.
Boys, I have some great news. I'm seeing Spider-Man 2 in theaters next Monday.
What?
Oh,
Oh, it's the
where at?
20th anniversary.
Yeah, well, Sony Columbia is also doing a 100th anniversary. So the Regals are doing Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3 this week, next week, and the week after, with 1, 2, and 3 respectively. Your boy is seeing number 2 in RPX at Regal, so we're getting it on the big screen. And
Really?
it's
You
sold
didn't
out theater.
you didn't want to go for Spider-Man 3?
Unfortunately, I'm not here for Spider-Man 3, but
Oh, bummer.
call me crazy. I kind of like that movie. Yeah, is the right answer to that.
Yeah, it's a war crime.
It's a
That is a solid F.
Like I've said, I will happily take all of this. I have a good time. I have fun with it.
What do you think of the pie? So good.
See, I'm probably going to get, after we get off this, I'm going to go watch Spider-Man 3, purely to spite you both.
Well, you enjoy it, my friend. Get lost in that film. Lose yourself.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad someone likes it.
Anton's like, get lost and stay lost.
The best defense I've ever heard of that movie from someone is it was supposed to be bad.
Anyone who says that is also somebody who says Extremis was a well-written plot point of Iron Man 3.
Well,
Yep.
As far as Iron Man 3 goes, Garrett, thank you so much for joining us. It's
Thank
been
you,
a pleasure.
Garrett.
Gentlemen, pleasure. Honestly, just to spend this time with you makes my day.
Well, Anton, that's it for Iron Man 3. We are going to be back next week with an absolute treasure of a film.
Yes, we are, listeners.
It's a big one. Bigger than Iron Man 3. No offense, Garrett. It's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Pretty big film.
So much fun. So everyone, we will see you next week. Hold on to your potatoes. And that is it for this week's edition of Why Wasn't It Better? Take care. Thanks for listening to Why Wasn't It Better? If you've made it this far, it's safe to assume that you like what you hear. If you have not already done so, please hit that subscribe button and become a follower wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you really like what you hear, you can contribute to our podcast monetarily and sign up for our Patreon. So whether you're commuting, chilling at home, or embarking on a nostalgia-fueled movie adventure, make Why Wasn't It Better your go-to podcast companion.